Hello, and welcome to the Tracie Austin Show, where we bring you the truth about the paranormal, the supernatural, and the highly strange. Without further delay, your host, Tracie Austin.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Tracie Austin, and just a quick reminder here, if you've not yet subscribed to the show at our YouTube channel, we would love for you to head over there and support us. It's very simple. All you need to do is just click on the subscribe link, and that is it. And we would greatly appreciate your support and your following. Now, my guest today, again, back by popular demand because we had such a great response, is John DeSouza, and we are going to continue to talk about the extra dimensionals. So let's welcome John. Hi John, welcome back to the show.
Hi Tracie, it's great to be back with you guys.
Thank you so much. And you are back with us through popular demand. I hope you know that.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you.
We had such a great response from the first show that we did with you that we had to invite you back to continue talking about extra dimensionals.
Yeah, it's important stuff sometimes. Little hard for people sometimes, but it's important.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to start this show, John, by talking about Michio Kaku. I think you know who I'm referring to here, the physicist, futurist, and scientist.
Yes.
And I had heard him actually talking about other dimensions and the fact that other dimensions do certainly exist beyond the third dimension, but are much, much smaller. And he talks about smoke, for example, as an example, permeating around a room in all three dimensions. But that smoke never disappears or floats into the fourth dimension. And he says, therefore, the fourth and fifth and sixth dimensions have to be smaller than the smoke. Even with atoms don't drift away into other dimensions either. So the higher the dimensions are, they have to be smaller than an atom. Otherwise, he says, other universes would float away. I had a hard time grasping that, but when I thought about it and I got my head wrapped around it, I thought, you know what? It all makes sense. It all makes sense. Does it make sense to you?
Well, I can more or less see what he was shooting for. And yes, there's things that appear in our universe and then they disappear. And where are they going to? In the Islamic philosophy, they say that there are worlds that are sheaths within sheaths. Mm-hmm. And the Buddhist philosophy talks about the unknowable sounds that are divine, that only divine ears can pick up. Mm-hmm. There's so many different ways to describe it, but there are things that are in our universe and they disappear from here and they go to someplace else, and we don't know where to.
And this is it. And people have a hard time grasping it because they know what they see, but they don't know where the heck it came from. It just manifested. And this is how things arrive here in our dimension. You talked in your book, John, that these sentient beings do not behave in a physical reality. If they were, they would make open contact and they would communicate with our leaders and they would consummate trade with humanity. So simply put, they can't because they have no physicality. They can't achieve the same physicality again in our reality yet. So what do you mean by that? Yet?
Well, here's the trick behind that. Even though from everything I've seen, alien visitors do not have physicality, like you said. However, they have plenty of technology. They have plenty of other things, devices. They have these UFOs, the real ones. UFOs, which to me appears that the real ones tend to be conscious, sentient life themselves as well. And so they have so many other things that they can use at their command other than themselves physically being here, that it really creates a huge illusion, for lack of a better term, that they are always present here and always with us all the time through their use of technology and other things that they have at their command. And we see this all the time. And yet there is no parade down the White House lawn. There is no open commerce. They're not here in large numbers, and they're not physically here. And there was a great philosopher, Antonio Fermi, who said, if they're not here in large numbers, it's because they can't be. It has to be because they cannot be. And that's what I believe. I believe they just can't be physically here.
Right. In regards to UFO sightings, I've had a number of UFO sightings, John. Actually, I've had over a dozen, one of which was literally 200 feet above my car in Studio City, California. That thing popped into existence that was so magical. It's hard to describe that to anybody unless they were there seeing it. And I won't go into the whole story of it because it's too long for our show, but it was basically 3 lights in the sky, and I thought I was seeing a plane that was going to fall from the sky because it was too low and too slow. But 2 lights became 3, and then bam, it's right over my car. I'm with my ex-husband at the time. We both saw it. This object was an elongated diamond shape that was nuts and bolts. I mean, if I'd have had something in my hand, I could have thrown and hit it. It was that low. It was 200 feet. But you've also had a.
Can I tell you? Can I tell you something that
Yes, go ahead.
That you didn't do? Let me tell you something about your experience that you probably haven't told anybody. I'll bet you that you didn't get out a flashlight and start flashing at it with your flashlight.
We did not, and that's because we did not have a flashlight with us at the time. We didn't even think of using our cameras on our cell phones, John.
It's shock and freeze. Shock and freeze
we were in awe. We were mesmerized at what we were seeing because we knew it was not from here. And I know that you have had a UFO sighting too.
Yeah, I did when I was about 9 or 10 years old. It's very strange because a very famous actor, Yaphet Kotto, from the original Alien movie from 79, actually in the news, he was in the news the other day, and he gave an experience where he had when he was 9 or 10 years old. It's almost exactly the same as my experience. It was very strange. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I was in New York City with my parents. We were at some sort of a big party out in the city. It was some kind of wedding reception, hundreds and hundreds of people there. But all of the little kids were kind of bored, and we kind of found each other, and it was way past our bedtime. We were all sugared up, and it was about 1 a.m. So we escaped from the hall. We went out into the streets, and we were way out. We probably got like a half a mile away from the hall because we were running through the streets, running wild, playing tag and Rigolevio, and it was crazy, beautiful, starry night, very starry night. And we were in a neighborhood actually called the Projects. Very bad idea to be running around in the Projects. But I was tussling with one of the older boys. One of the older boys hit me in the stomach. I went down on the sidewalk. One of the kids yelled out, "He's hurt, he's hurt." And so they all ran away. They ran back to the hall and left me there. And I was just staring up between the 2 tallest buildings I'd ever seen up until that time in my life. And I was looking, and there was one spot in space that was completely black. Everything else was beautiful stars, but there was this one area that was just black, like a black ink cloud, like the kind of squid would give off in the water when you try to catch them with your hand. And I kept looking at this. As I kept looking at this thing, some spotlights came out the bottom of that cloud, that black cloud, and those spotlights came right towards me. And it was like a flying saucer, a disc-shaped flying saucer, and it came down towards me, and I felt that spotlight, that bluish greenish spotlight that we've seen so many witnesses feel at different times. And 2 girls appeared on my left, teenage girls, and they were looking up at the same thing I was. They were screaming their heads off, hugging each other and looking up at it as well. And one of them yelled at me, "Little boy, you better run home. The world might be ending." And then those 2 girls disappeared. They were gone. And I just myself and the saucer, I felt a connection with it where I felt spiritually that this was not something human at all. Even at that age, I knew nothing about UFOs or anything. But at the same time, myself and the flying saucer changed our minds at the same moment. I took a step back out of the spotlight, and this thing reversed course, and we're back up into the cloud, and it just went, and the cloud disappeared.
Right.
And then I ran to my parents, tell them the story. My mom told me about not talking about these topics in front of people, and we waited till home, and then I was able to tell them the whole story.
Right.
And they were not happy to hear it.
Right. I wish, John, everyone could have the experience that we've had to understand how real this phenomena is. And unfortunately, not everybody does. Did the FBI investigate your sighting?
No, and I certainly did not volunteer it to them. There was nothing on the any of the evaluations
Right.
or any of the questionings on of that sort of thing. And I'm glad that there wasn't, because it probably wouldn't have gone over very well.
Right. So what, in your opinion, John, what's your opinion of the experiences that we hear from the likes of Dr. David Jacobs, who I highly respect? He does a phenomenal job regressing these abductees that have seen ships, been on board, and they've had contact with greys, Nordic beings, reptilians, for example. And, the abductions are there. I mean, there's marks on the body. Do you think then that these beings are extra-dimensional? Or do you think there's some physicality coming in there?
I love Dr. Jacobs' work. His body of work is amazing, and the work that he does to help people in this area, it's really phenomenal. And yes, there is a chance that they are able to achieve our level of physicality for short periods of time. That's very possible. Because when you talk to the witnesses, they are going through a physical experience. They know in themselves that this is real, but here's the problem. People think that the word real and the word physical mean the same thing, and they don't.
Right.
Because we are also multidimensional beings, because you are a physical being, but you also have a spiritual body.
Exactly.
That occupies the exact same space as your physical body. So here's the thing. I see little clues across all of these cases across the years where the people who are going through these abductions, through these contact experiences, they seem to pass through a sort of a curtain, some kind of vibratory change, where you'll hear things like little clues like the air changed,
right.
the vibration of the room changed, suddenly all the noises outside went silent. The normal birds and chirping and so forth. Everything went silent. Right. And even the colors all went silent. And then contact happened. Then the abduction occurred. Then, but so my contention is that there is a chance that all of these experiences are multidimensional experiences where something in the person is converted temporarily, right. Changed temporarily, right. Shifted a little bit in their vibration so that they become extra-dimensionals also.
Right. And of course, we also have the evidence of our dear friend, he was a dear friend to me of 20 years, Dr. Roger Lear, who I know you knew, who, was the surgeon that removed 17 alleged alien implants. So we have the evidence of those things being placed in the physical body by these beings.
Absolutely.
Not tracking devices.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think they are then, if they're not tracking devices?
Dr. Roger Lear was a little bit skeptical at first. He thought they were tracking devices until he got to remove them and know more about them. What they are doing is monitoring people's DNA.
I think they're changing people's DNA.
Right.
Yeah.
They're monitoring and they are changing for their benefit. I don't know if it's for ours. I think it's for their benefit.
Yeah, it's definitely for their benefit, yes. Absolutely. And Roger Lear did phenomenal work.
He was phenomenal, yes.
Before he passed, and I think his work is being carried on by others, but the work that he did was amazing, and the help that he gave to the community was really amazing. And I think his final conclusion was that these implants, these alien implants that are physical, now these are completely physical, right. And they are placed in a physical body. And I think Dr. Jacobs also believed that these things are there to change the actual DNA structure of those people. And for what purpose and what's the ultimate goal with that, we're not going to know
sure.
until the great day of revelation, when they come back and they do whatever they're going to do.
Right.
So that's where we are with that.
Absolutely. Well, hold that thought, John, and don't go anywhere just yet. Don't grab that cup of tea just yet, because we are going to go to our commercial break for our sponsor, and we will be right back.
The Tracie Austin Show is sponsored by Heaven to Earth Spiritual and Transformational Cruises. For more information, visit heaventoearth.com.
And welcome back with us, John.
Thank you, Tracie. Great being back with you.
Great. I wanted to, because before we went to the commercial break there, we were talking about abductions, and I just wanted to talk to you about an abduction that was an attempted abduction on your life at the time.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, after my observation experience when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I had what I've seen in many cases across the years, which is there's this sort of stalking period where you have an observation experience, and then that information, I guess, gets taken back to wherever, and then you have a contact experience. Well, a few weeks later, I was at my parents' home, and I was just sleeping. And it was late at night, and suddenly, like I said, the room changed temperature. Everything, the vibration in the room kind of changed, and my body went rigid as I was in bed asleep. I was awake, but my body went rigid, and I felt hands on my hands and my head and my feet lifting me up like a plank, but a plank like filled with helium, because they were lifting me up, and I just saw the ceiling coming closer and closer, and they were climbing on nothing, because there was nothing there. I felt like it was children, because they were small, these beings that were carrying me, and they were climbing on nothing towards the ceiling, and they started passing through the ceiling, and they were trying to bring me through, and my forehead bumped against the ceiling, wouldn't go through, and this confused them greatly. They kept on lowering me. Wherever they lowered me in the air, I stayed there. And then they kept examining the spot where I wouldn't go through, and they kept on trying again, repeating the same results with repeating the same actions, expecting different results, and it didn't work for them. And as they did that again and again, I was able to move my neck more and more, and I finally was able to look over towards my parents' bed, which was right off my bedroom, but now the door was wide open, and I looked in there, and I could see. And I thought they were for little children at first, but they were small, gray beings holding their hands over my parents' bed, keeping them asleep apparently, because they were struggling there to wake up, and they couldn't. And they just had their hands out, and I was able to crank my neck just enough to see the closest one to me on the ground. And I saw those big black wraparound eyes. And I saw those eyes, and they looked right at me. I looked at the creature, and I heard the only words I ever heard from them. All I heard was, "He's awake," from that creature I was looking at. And I heard it in my head, not out loud.
Right.
And then it was like somebody cut a cord, and I fell back into my bed like a sack of potatoes. And it's just springs, and just the experience was basically over at that point.
But you had no physical damage at all. Did you?
No, none. And not only that, I'd never had another visitation, contact experience whatsoever after that.
Right. That reminds me of what happened to you, a story about Bud Hopkins. You're aware of who Bud Hopkins was, who sadly passed away 3 years ago, so the late Bud Hopkins. He had a client that this similar thing happened to, where they tried to get him to go through the ceiling. And he would not pass through the ceiling. They couldn't understand why he couldn't pass through it. And he kept talking about how he was being slammed against the ceiling, so much so that there was actual damage to his back. His back was severely damaged, had injuries, and he was in and out of hospital with this. How do you talk to your doctor about what happened to you? How do you?
You can't.
You can't.
You can't.
They're not going to understand it.
No. And I've been told a lot of different theories about people who aren't taken, and the most prominent one appears to be blood type. They say that certain blood types are repellent to them and cannot be, I don't know, assimilated by them. They can't deal with it. And so maybe that's it. But whatever it was, they never bothered me again.
Wow. Well, for the research I did for my book, John, Alien Encounters in the Western United States, the blood type that I had seen that was more prevalent was the rhesus negative. Not to say that other people with, A positive, B positives, O positives weren't being taken. They were. But it seemed to be the rhesus negative for some, because it's universal blood type.
Oh.
It's a universal blood type. So for their hybrid program, it seemed that was more sufficient. But I do have a question for you here, John, from a lady named Marisela from New York. And she asks if there were ever any files that you saw at the FBI that were related to alien abductions.
I would say yes. And
really?
And I can't talk about them because the things that I can talk about are things that have been brought out to the public view already and that are in the public arena, so that there's no harm in discussing these things openly. However, I have seen very similar patterns and stories in the show The X-Files. So that's all I can tell you.
So you are saying that the FBI are indeed aware of alien abductions?
Well, of course they are. Sure, they are.
They know it's happening.
However, there's a standing order throughout the government, and not just our government, all the national governments and all of their organs and organizations, that you must never allow anything to be revealed that shows real alien visitors, real true UFOs, and what they're doing and what their agenda is. And that standing order has been out for 60 years. People don't even know where it came from originally, but they do know that it's real and it must be kept, because if it's not, it turns out bad for whoever violates that order.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that with us, John. That's interesting to know. I do want to talk to you about the STS-75 footage that happened in space, and we're going to bring it up on the screen here in a moment. And for our audience who know nothing about what happened with this STS-75 footage, it happened in February of 1996, and this happened in space above Northwest Africa. NASA conducted an energy technology breakthrough experiment. They launched a 12-mile long electric conductor cable, a tether that would greatly help in space propulsion. But something went wrong. The tether broke from an overload of electricity due to an inaccurate estimates in the electrical charge of the Earth's magnetic fields. And let's take a look at this, John, as we are seeing this footage on our screen. So we see the tether there in space, and suddenly, out of nowhere, all of these what look like orbs come in around the tether. Like, what is this? What's this doing here? What are we dealing with? So give us your rendition of what you think, John, that we're looking at, because these orbs do seem to be all the same. You know, they have a cutout pattern, like someone's taken a bite out of them, and a central hole. So what's your opinion of this?
My opinion is that our common sense tells us that we're looking at exactly what we think we're looking at. These are a large number of non-terrestrial UFOs that are coming to check out what is going on with the ISS at that time, and that's exactly what it is. It is what we see that it is. You see it with your own eyes, and your own common sense tells you what you're looking at. Now, what the tether incident really tells us about is about the capacity, the unbelievable capacity of NASA to deceive people. But even more than that, the incredible capacity of the American people to accept deceit and just make them disbelieve the evidence of their own eyes of what they see happening here.
Right. So,
That's
John,
what I see.
do you think then that what we're seeing with these ships, these vehicles, extraterrestrial vehicles, do you think that they're in physical form, or do you think that they suddenly popped in to our dimension?
Yeah, I think that they're plasmic. They have plasmic nature, so they are able to transit through states of being, states of materiality. And yeah, I think for lack of a better term, I mean, because we're just humans, we only know how to describe things a certain way. So yeah, they kind of popped into our materiality in order to find out what's going on. Because what we see in the tether incident is you see an incredibly unique experiment that was done there, where they did a mix of electrical energy and magnetic energy in this giant tether that ended up breaking loose and becoming a giant antenna, 12-mile long antenna that started broadcasting this mix of electricity and magnetism directly out into the space above the Earth.
Right.
And so what you see immediately is you see all of these UFOs that pop into existence, so to speak, and just are running over, because this thing is acting as a distress signal. I mean, that's how it can be taken by them.
Right, exactly.
Some kind of distress signal of something that's going on. So all of these UFOs, some of them massive in size and some of them smaller, they're running over at top speed. And you can actually see in the footage, you can see some of them slowing down as they come close to where the antenna is giving off their signals to see what the heck is going on.
Exactly.
That's what they want to know.
And we know they're not ice crystals, ice particles, they're not space debris. You can tell that they are being intelligently guided. If our viewers don't know what we're talking about, do go online and Google this, STS-75. It's the tether footage. And I brought it up today to John because John actually mentioned it in his book, so I wanted his take on it.
It's a phenomenal incident. What it shows about NASA and what it shows about people who are just willing to accept nonsense to cover up the evidence of their own eyes. It's just extraordinary.
Right.
Extraordinary.
And it's just like the monuments, John, on the moon and Mars, and you know, the way people have been hired by NASA to actually airbrush out UFOs. Donna Hare was hired to airbrush out UFOs from the moon. We know that there are structures there.
Absolutely. It's visible. You can see it.
Weren't placed by us.
Yeah, and NASA is in the business of making us believe that the moon is just a dull gray color when it's not. It's absolutely not.
There's an atmosphere.
And if you see Jose Escamilla's great work showing us what the moon really looks like, not by photoshopping, but by reinforcing the real structures that are really there, you can see what's there. And on Mars, the same thing. The Mars is not a dull red ball, the way that NASA portrays it in this imagery. There's actual grid lines. We can see the civilizations that were there. It's visible.
I have a couple of questions for you here, John, as we're counting down to the end of our show. Joan, who asked us a question in the first show, came back to us and she said, have you seen how military show up within seconds of an alien encounter? Seems like military is also accessing dimensions, portals. So what do you think, John?
I don't think the military of any particular nation would be allowed access to that technology because they would use it against each other.
Okay.
I mean, the nations. If the military from one nation was allowed to use interdimensional portals, then they would immediately use it against another nation.
Right.
So I don't think that would be allowed. However, if you want to see Air Force interaction with real UFOs, all you have to do is Google the 1952 UFO invasion over the Capitol building in Washington, D.C.
I know the photo you're talking about.
Yeah, there's videos of that. There's pictures.
Absolutely.
And there was an entire commission, governmental commission report, the Roberts Commission, that issued all kinds of stuff. But that was the first and only time in the Western world when an entire Air Force was sent after a bunch of UFOs. And it was a catastrophe for the American Air Force because these UFOs did loop-de-loops around them. They did face-to-faces. They did over and unders. And they generally humiliated our jets at that time. And they could have destroyed every single one of them, but they didn't. They didn't. All they did was embarrass them. And that was the only time, ever since that time, never again has an Air Force been sent en masse against UFOs after that incident.
Okay. Real quick, John, we're down to about 30 seconds here of our show. What's your opinion then, John, on the disclosure campaigns of both Dr. Stephen Greer and Stephen Bassett? Do you think they're actually going to get the government to say something?
No, we're going to have revelation, not disclosure. Disclosure is not a real thing, and it never will be, because you're begging the governments when they're not the right people to be begging.
And what's in it for the government anyway?
Yeah, they're going to confess that they had access to this technology all this time, that they're criminals, basically. Right. They're not going to do that.
Exactly. John, thank you so much for joining us again on this episode. It's been wonderful to see you. You are a wealth of information. Real quick, just give us your website.
My website is johnthamabooks.com. And anybody can get free samples of my books on my Facebook, John DeSouza Facebook, and just look me up on Twitter, YouTube. You just Google my name. You can find everything I've been doing.
Great. Thank you, John. And as always, do check out the Tracie Austin Show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And until next time, be safe. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
The Tracie Austin Show is sponsored by Heaven to Earth Spiritual and Transformational Cruises. For more information, visit heaventoearth.com.